Welcome to Inspirational Journeys of the Best Minds, brought to you by IMERGEY. In today's episode, we have the privilege of welcoming Anand Mishra, the Global Head of Bid and Proposal Management at SAP Customer Success. Anand embodies inspiration in today's transformative workforce landscape. As he highlighted in a recent Forbes report, we are in an era heavily influenced by artificial intelligence, with predictions that AI will impact almost 40% of global jobs. Anand advocates that learning AI related skills will open new avenues for executives to stay competitive. He also emphasizes the importance of balancing technical abilities with distinctly human skills like empathy, leadership, and of course, problem solving. Anand believes in a human centered approach and encourages personal balance, nurturing passions outside of work as well for mental wellness and creativity. His leadership exemplifies the belief that culture serves as the oxygen for successful strategy execution, emphasizing the importance of shared values and prioritizing people alongside business goals. Join us as we delve into Anand's thoughts on innovation, self awareness, and how professionals and organizations can thrive amid evolving challenges. Welcome to the show, Anand.
Thank you so much, Sharmistha. It's a pleasure. It's a privilege, and we're looking forward to our conversations.
So, the first question, which I'm very personally very inquisitive about, is what did you want to become as a kid, Anand? And how did you get started in your career?
So, as a kid, I wanted to be a journalist, and then as I grew up, if I think when I was in college, I wanted to be an economist. I wanted to come to London School of Economics, join the World Bank. Not everything goes for what you think. So, in the end, after I passed out from my college, I took up my internship and then I went on to pursue my chartered accountancy. But I think some things still say journalist is a lot about storytelling. And I think that aspect has remained with me through the various roles that I have done.
Right. That's a very versatile set of professions and inclinations, that you had. So that brings me to the next question. Tell us a little bit about where did you grow up, and did that affect who you became, especially as a leader in communications?
So I grew up in the suburbs of Kolkata back in India. For those who are familiar, it's in the eastern part of the country. The first 13 years, the good times and the adversities, jute used to be the golden fiber in those days. I'm talking of the 60s and 70s when I was born, and then we had a golden period where we had tremendous opportunities to have a good life. And I was fortunate that along with my father and his colleagues, we also witnessed the last 7, 8 years where we saw the industry going in decline. So, those things, a lot of my resilience, I would say, comes from there.
Great. I can clearly spot many layers, towards, probably framing you and your personality and, for you to become who you are today. So here is a question that I'm sure might enthuse a lot of young leaders and, budding entrepreneurs. That initially, when you started your career, what are those challenges that you faced, professionally, and how did you identify them and then, work on it to overcome them?
Yeah, yeah. So I believe that life is full of challenges, ups and downs. So small challenges will always be there. I often tell this story that my corporate career started when I was 10 years old or maybe 8 years old. Then people ask me why, explain. And coming back to, as I said, I was very fortunate. My father was a jute technologist in the jute industry. We had these big factories where all the families, which means my father and all his colleagues, we used to stay in the same campus. Yeah. And the good times I talked about, the bad times, I'll tell you a small story. I think I was about maybe 7, 8 years old. These adversities help you think on when go through challenges now in my last 15 years. I put a blog post this week saying that it helps you understand that the problems in the IT industry or problems that I face in my personal life or challenges is probably minuscule as what the previous generation, or just as an example what others would have seen. So coming back, I was maybe 12 years old. I was in a boarding school. I came back one of the summer vacations, and we used to stay just our bungalows where we had the chance to stay was about 50 feet away from the factory. And I came back, and I got instructions from my father that this summer vacation you are not supposed to open the door until we give you permission. And that was pretty strange because we were young people. We used to roam around the campus. Sometimes I used to go actually into his factory to ask him to come because mom had cooked some interesting food. I said, why has he given me this? And then I came to know that there were some very difficult situations with trade unionism and so on, and there were some disciplinary issues where he had to take a harsh action of actually dismissing one of the fellow workers. And it seemed that that fellow worker was linked to one of the local mafia trade unions, and there was a death threat to my father's life. And I've seen that phase where it took about 4 months, 5 months for the situation to get calmer. And on one side, I have seen him being very brave and matured at a lot of fronts, but I also saw the fear of death in his persona, right? Fear for his family and so on. And very interesting, he stuck to his principles. He had a death threat that if you go through the dismissal, then this is what we will do. But he went through that, right? And it's very interesting, he didn't live long, so he passed away when he was in his early 60s. And because it was a small industry, this gentleman, when he learned about my father's death, one fine day, a few months back, my mother heard a knock on the door. She opened the door, and it was this person who came probably at 20 years after this incident. And he said, I realized that what I did was a mistake, and I wanted to come in and you know, say sorry. These are small things when you think of what we go through. And it's not that because this is a personal story, there are so many adversities that we can learn from each other. I'm sure you have gone through. But then there are things that the easiest way you get inspiration when you come through challenges is when you feel what you have gone through. As I'm speaking to you, I can actually relate the story, right, very clearly. So in the interest of time, I'll pause and pass it back to you.
Well, you got me teared up, but thank you for sharing such a personal story, with us and of course our audience. I do have a question here. You mentioned something about facing backlash, with often even in the corporate life. How do you think somebody can embrace this as a challenge, and how can one inculcate that lack of fear into bringing something in an already established system, uh, without worrying too much about the friction that they might face from their immediate senior?
Yeah, yeah. Now you bring a very important topic, Sharmishta, change management. At SAP, when we help the world run better and the best run companies become their best, even from the customer point of view, when we try to help them with new solutions. Now if you see the whole cloud solutions part, now the AI part, all this is something new. It is not just about selling a software and then in one button, like a switch, the customer can start using it and implementing it, right? There are so many process things, and every time we help them successfully navigate through this, when you ask customers, their leaders as well as our leaders plus teams on the ground, they say change management is the most important element. On whether we try to start from point A to point B, success, one of the critical success factors is change management. And I think the job of the leader is to bring the pack together, right? See that no one is left behind. So what are things that can be done in change management? Not that I have all the answers, but we have a good team of HR colleagues, coaches. The first thing that is most important is having the culture where constantly we as leaders are trying to explain what I call why we do what we do, right? So the rationale of why change needs to be implemented, right? And then there are some very easy methodologies which you will see. There's one methodology where there is a nice graph which says, as you try to convince people, they move phase by phase. So the first is a denial phase. As human beings, we don't like change. So the first is denial phase. That's where you have to keep explaining why we do what we do. And then they come to a point where there is an acceptability zone. Right? That, okay, they have now accepted the fact that, yes, let's take an example of AI, right? You talked about AI in the introduction. It's the same thing. First is denial, and then there is an acceptance, right? And then once you come to an acceptance stage, then you have to think about, okay, how do I now execute this change in terms of how I take people through now on action mode. So denial, acceptance, action. And then again, the funny thing in today's world is, by the time you do these three steps, there is again some dramatic change, which means that you wanted to go from point A to point B. You took the team midway, and then you realize that point B is not the destination, point C is the destination. Right? This is what is happening. Right?
Correct.
And which means you can try all these methodologies, important, but I think we have to consciously develop certain competencies in our teams and the colleagues. What do you mean? If you ask me, Sharmistha, Anand, name specifically, change agility is a competency, right? People sometimes know, sometimes do not know. Change agility, which means if it's a competency, it's a skill, right? It's a skill that you can develop by practice. And I think one of the most important things that I would suggest for leaders and teams is, we have to be, coming back to the point, we have to be self-aware, which means, let me take an example of my company, SAP. We've got 100,000 employees, right? Now everyone does not have the same learning style, right? If you ask me what is the basic prerequisite which will be a deterrent to change agility, if out of those 100,000 colleagues, if all of them close their eyes and decide, I will not even see what is happening outside in, right? What is happening in the industry? If all of them close their eyes to that, you can never have change agility. So it's a basic prerequisite. We need to keep our eyes and ears open. We need to read. We need to understand, depending on what is your learning style. Somebody likes to network and learn what is happening outside in my industry, get that perspective. Fine. Somebody likes to read. Somebody likes to do something else. Somebody wants to attend a course. So one is the outside in perspective, big picture, and then constantly thinking on how is it going to impact how we deliver to our customers, as well as then the last part is, how does it help me stay relevant in terms of my contributions through my job, as well as my personal role in that. So all these things one has to be aware. Unless you are aware, unless you are making efforts to be aware, you can never be developing change agility.
I think from what you have said, there are three main takeaways. One is where I see self awareness staying right up in the pedestal for you, because as a leader as well as a person, you always need to know where you are headed and why you are doing or approaching certain thing. Second is consensus, which is a highly people centric quality, because as a leader, you can give direction, but it's the people who walk that path with you. So I think that becomes the secondary thing. And the final thing is being flexible and agile, because just because you have set point B in the blueprint doesn't mean that would remain the same in the next moment. So being agile and flexible is equally important for a leader in today's landscape. So I hope I've been able to
Super.
summarize it right. And thank you. Thank you. So I want to know a little bit about who would you say is the most influential person in your life, and how did he or she
Yeah.
impact you?
So on the professional front, of course, there are many. I feel I have a long list uh, of people whom I'm obliged to, who have made a deep impact in terms of my thinking and my career. But on the professional front, I call them virtual mentors, people whom I have never met but followed very closely, read their views and learned. First is Professor Clayton Christensen. I'm sure you've heard about him, the famous professor who's written The Innovator's DNA, The Innovator's Dilemma, deeply influenced by him. Professor Ramcharan, who's again an advisor to the CEOs. I have tried to follow his books and his methodologies. Futurist, especially on the technology side, Mr. Ray Kurzweil. He is one of the pioneers in artificial intelligence, technology, and so on. We are always obliged to our family, which means our parents, right? Mother and father. You ask people, mostly ask 10 people out of the room, they will say, eight of them will say, yes, they are our biggest inspiration. And but what I always thought as a child is I should try to pick the best things from my father and the best things from my mother. Right? If you ask me, I think I can tell you there were certain things in my father's career which I decided I will never pick up. Right? He was a workaholic, right? And I realized that this is not what I'm going to pick up. Right? Some of the other adversities certainly I can pick up. So coming back and finishing off on this, I've been very lucky that I've had spiritual mentors who have helped me as well as my wife find the purpose of my life. And they are the ones who I am most grateful of.
Um, so let's talk a little bit around work culture. You have been a very emphatic advocate of maintaining a very balanced, workplace culture, and it's a topic you frequently speak on as well. So could you share some specific initiatives or practices that have been most effective for you or around you, and which have
Yeah,
also helped
yeah.
your
No,
teams?
thanks, Sharmistha, for bringing this up. I first get reminded of a blog post that I recently did where I talked about the Fish Club and that initiative that we had run maybe 10, 15 years back. I used to work for a group called SAP Custom Development in those days, and it was all about how to bring more positivity into the culture at that point of time, right? And for me, I was very fortunate that along with a core group of people I could sort of sponsor and lead that. And we had a problem statement. We were a great organization that grew very fast. We were serving probably 200, 300 customer projects in a year through custom development. We had a great batch of young talent that we had brought in, but at some point we realized that we had a work life balance problem, right? So we had to inculcate passion as well as creativity and fun in the workplace. One of the final things that I've also said in one of my blog posts where I talked about culture as oxygen: do pit stop checks, which means you should come and question me, Anand. All this lecture that you are giving, is your team every quarter, every pit stop, are you checking, is the environment good enough? Are we doing change management well? Are we having an environment where people can be curious or they are allowed to be curious? Are we following an environment where there are ideas coming in, but all the ideas are going into a shelf, which means there is no room for innovative thinking? So, to summarize, a lot of it can be lectures, but it has to be practiced. And it also has to be, you'll again, blame me for that term self reflection, but this is not self reflection, this is execution discipline, right? So
Right.
anything that we execute, we have to do it with discipline. So which means at pit stops, we have to check. Like I said in that blog, in cities, we know in some countries, winter sets in, the oxygen quality goes down, right? But if you see, you look at any news channel weather report, everywhere oxygen air quality levels are being monitored on a daily basis. So similarly, culture has to be monitored, if not on a daily basis, at regular pit stops.
Regular
Back to
basis.
you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you once again for such an insightful explanation to this and for breaking it down in such simpler terms, because I think a lot of leaders today, somewhere, there is a threshold that they have hit when it comes to having this open, curious culture and, chasing the brass tacks, which is business and goals. And it is important that both these processes need to go hand in hand to be able to not just achieve the results but surpass them in many cases. So thank you. Now, since you mentioned, curious, let's talk about this generation. Let's talk about the youth, where youth empowerment has kind of become a keyword in most blogs and organizational, speeches. But what I want to know is, what are your insights? You have mentored many young talents. So what are your insights? What are your takeaways when you deal with the youth? And where do you see the potential of youth, especially in the industry that you are in, which has the most young population contributing in the enterprise tech space? How do you see that developing in the next decade or so?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks. And I'm a big fan of youth talent. Of course, we believe in diversity, which means all kinds of talent, be it youth talent, mid-career professionals, senior professionals. They all have a very important role to play. But especially for the youth, my first message would be dream big, pursue those dreams, and passion. There's no harm if you start small. Try to look for role models early part of your career, emulate them, right? Again, to the point that try to pick the best out of what you get, right? So and to finish off, some people may agree to this statement, some may not agree. I believe every generation is smarter than the previous one. So often we have this bottleneck. Will the young talent be able to do what the mid talent does? Will the mid talent be able to do what the senior leaders do? Actually, every generation is smarter, right? So we have to encourage them, try to give time to them in terms of what they need. And one last thing which is often ignored is, as you work with young talent, you can do reverse mentoring, which means they can tell you what you can learn.
Correct.
I've been fortunate that like I told you, the fish club experience, I had the chance to work with the young college colleagues. That time still there was probably a 10-year age difference. Now I am above 50. I still get the chance when I interact with colleagues who are in their first 10 years of their career, and I actually involve them often in projects, sometimes off my work. And I've seen they are the ones who can actually tell you how outdated you are in terms of your thinking, or how good you are in some of the areas. So that reverse mentoring is something that can work. It helps you not only make friends with them, but it also helps you learn, right? So back to you.
So let's say you win a lottery, Anand, and now money is not a factor. How and what will you do to, spend your
Yeah.
time on a daily basis?
As I said, my wife and I think we are very fortunate that we have been able to find the purpose of our life. So if I had that magic wand, then thanks to our spiritual mentors, I would like to devote full of my time in helping others find the purpose of their lives, right? And if I look at the last 8-10 years, every time, luckily, either in a corporate context or a personal context, my wife and I, sometimes separate, sometimes together, we've been able to do things beyond work. So the last 5 to 8 years, we have been spending more time in terms of helping ourselves and helping others find the purpose of their life, but we are not full time into that, right? So there's a mix. Obviously, you have to run your life with the right balance. But if that was the lottery, that I don't have to think about anything, then I would go full time into that. And that's pretty much the retirement plan.
Thank you so much, Anand. It's been such a pleasure, first of all, for us as well as for our audience to, hear you, to understand your passion for a balanced, human-centered approach. It's our shared values and human connections that keep us grounded. And everything that you said today is indeed a true reflection of what is the binding factor in being a successful individual in today's life. So we can't wait to see the impact that your leadership would continue to, unfold. And thanks again.
Thank you so much, Sharmistha. I have to multiply the thanks by 2x, because I am more privileged and fortunate to be here. My coach, whom I am always fortunate to work with, my coach inside SAP, he has a very nice punchline. He says, to your point on human connections, all of us as human beings have stories to tell, and it's a matter of thinking about what is your story and how can you make that story more fulfilling for yourself as for others, by serving them, by reaching out to them. And yes, AI will be important, but it can never replace human connections, and it can never replace the stories that me and you have experienced, and the stories that we have to tell. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening in. This was inspirational journeys of the best minds for you. Stay tuned for another episode.